So, guys, you're both out in the Club World Cup right now. I think, Rob, you're in Orlando. James, are you still in Philly right now where it's a little bit hot?
Yes, I am. There is a extreme heat warning here because it's pushing 100 degrees for the first time in 13 years. So I'm safely inside talking to you guys.
Do you do well in the heat, James? Are you a fan of the heat?
I'm all right, actually. Yeah, because I'm cold all the time in England normally. So when it's about 40 degrees here, I'm all right. I'm actually warm. So yeah, it's quite a rare feeling for me. What about you?
I think you both remember going to the World Cup in Qatar. Everyone was complaining about it's going to be really hot, it's going to be really bad, and air conditioned stadiums. And nobody actually realised that the USA in the summer is pretty hot. So I admire your guys' certainly resilience and resolve for putting up with that. I'm going to fly up next week, so I've got my shorts, my flip flops ready. But anyway, in the meantime, from the football perspective, has it been a success? James, have you found it so far?
I would say that a lot of my pre-tournament concerns have been realised at this point, and I think what I didn't anticipate really was just the kind of lack of pickup domestically, and just how in day-to-day life in America, how hard it is to find the tournament. It's not easy to find on the TV channels. You go to the sports bars and they've got ESPN on pretty much every channel as normal on every screen, and they're not showing, they don't split it up. It's just their domestic sports here that are on pretty much all the time. I mean, you can find it, but it's in sort of, one bar in five rather than every sports bar having the game on. And I mean, there was one place in Atlanta, I don't know, Rob, if you've seen it when you were there, but there was a place that self-styled itself as the headquarters of the Club World Cup. They had a banner at the top of this bar, and you go in and they didn't show the Bayern Munich game at all that day. That was when they beat Alton City 10-0. And then there was a game on late that night that Seattle Sounders were playing in, so a domestic team, and they didn't even show it, and they closed the bar 20 minutes into the game. So the sort of the local pickup has just it's been really hard to find it in amongst Game 7 of the NBA for the first time in, I think it's 8 or 9 years. The Stanley Cup, the US Open Golf was on the first weekend that I came out here. So it's a very saturated market. And I think because this Club World Cup has been quite diluted in the group stage, you've had some good games, some pretty average games. I think it's struggled to capture the imagination in a way that hopefully it will do when the knockout matches start. The bigger teams play each other kind of every time, and we all know what they're playing for.
No, to be honest, I mean, I take all that, and all that is true. And my general feeling is that this has been better than I thought it would be. I think it's been helped because the South American teams have done well. One of my fears was that the European teams would just blitz everyone, and it would turn, the knockout rounds would just be an extended version of the Champions League, and everyone would kind of switch off. But the South American teams have done well. Their fans have been fantastic. They've given kind of these games a bit of colour and atmosphere, which has been fantastic. I think the players, I mean, obviously I've been based with City, usually, and I think the buy-in from players has been better than I thought it would be. I mean, again, the kind of noises coming out of City initially were that this was a bit of an annoyance. They've had a long, hard season where they hadn't done particularly well and they weren't getting any holidays, and then they were straight back out. I think the more the tournament's gone on for them, City have tried to make it feel like an international World Cup as best they can. And I think that's kind of helped. Obviously, you don't have that problem with Pep because he's such a fan of world football. This is his bag, basically. This is what he lives for, all these kind of different teams from all around the world competing against each other. I think the attendances have generally been better than I thought they were going to be. I mean, there was, again, worries that you could be playing in front of crowds of a couple of thousand. I mean, I don't think that's bar one or two. I don't think that's really happened. I would agree with James. I mean, the one thing that I find strange is the lack of kind of advertising around these cities. You drive in Ubers on stuff to stadiums and training grounds. You walk around these cities, there isn't a massive amount of advertising that these games are even going on. And I find that strange because, FIFA clearly want buy-in. So you would think that they would be trying to get the message out as best they can. I mean, the one thing that FIFA have said, and again, City have said as well, is that you have to remember that this is the first try at this. This extended tournament has never been done before. And when you talk about, an international World Cup, that's been established for decades. This is the first go. And I genuinely think that FIFA clubs, players think that maybe in 2 or 3, however many years, 2 or 3 tournaments, that they will get a proper buy-in of this. And maybe we're talking about this tournament, in 10 years, 15 years time as the tournament. I think we have to remember that this is the first try at this.
It's a bit strange over here because obviously right now in the UK, so you've got, cricket is on right now. You've got tennis tournaments on right now. So it's definitely not been dominating the headlines. And I think, with due respect to Man City and Chelsea, they're not the biggest clubs in the Premier League. If Man United or Liverpool were here, even Arsenal, it would be different because I think with City and Chelsea, beyond their fan base, nobody really cares how they get on. And even beyond that, my next door neighbour is a Man City season ticket holder. And I spoke to him the day after the first game, the Casablanca game. I said, "Did you watch the game?" And he shrugged his shoulders, said, "No, I play golf." So this is like a die-hard Man City fan who's been watching the club for 30 years, probably more than that. And he wasn't interested in the club's first ever game in the Club World Cup. So, it's not really caught fire in that aspect. And also a lot of the games UK-wise are, at 2 o'clock in the morning. So it's been hard to get any momentum. But I think certainly you do know that there are games going on. And I think the interesting element has been the Flamengos and the River Plates and the Bocas that have, Botafogo that have got through. But I'd be lying to say if it was catching people's attention. It isn't right now. And I think I don't quite know how you change that unless you play in an area where the time zone works better. I don't know, but it doesn't feel like it's caught fire right now.
The way you change it is to go to 16 teams, but they've skipped that level out altogether, and there was no evidence that there was an appetite for a 32 team competition club summer tournament like this. There just wasn't any. The previous incarnations of this took place over a week. They had, I think, 6. I think the last one that City won had 6 matches in total, because they sort of created a kind of a first round and then the semi-final and the finals. So, they're talking about going to 48 teams. Like the International World Cup. That will be a joke if they do that. They need to make this 32 team format work. Had it been 16. And the games all mattered, a bit like the sort of old school European Championships where, you had sort of Spain playing Germany in the first game and they knew if they lost it, because it's top 2 go through and you're straight into the quarterfinals, you kind of knew, bang, straight away where you were. It was an easy sell to a casual audience. This game matters for both teams. If they lose it, they're really on the back foot from day one in the group. Whereas here it's kind of like we've not even really heard of some of the teams. The champions are here, but some of the champions are not here. It's one world champion, but how can you be world champion if you've not won your league or you've not won your continental competition? It's such a confusing kind of message to send to what, as I said, was a really sort of saturated sports market. I mean, just picking up on the Brazilian teams as well, that the only time I've really felt like I've been at a tournament was when Flamengo played Chelsea, and the night before Botafogo beat PSG, and we were out having dinner, and it's the first time where I've really felt a strong sort of fan presence in the city, and that's what a lot of these tournaments are about. Some of my best experiences of doing sort of World Cups and European Championships is where you go to a city and it's a class of cultures where fans from 2 different countries and the third host country all mingle together and they all sing their songs and the atmosphere is incredible, and you sort of feel like you're really part of a kind of carnival of football. And here it's just not felt like that at all, apart from when Flamengo were in Philadelphia and they sort of booed Botafogo all the way through the game when they were playing PSG, and then at full time the fans in the bar that we were in all started chanting, and I actually went over and said to them, like, I thought you weren't happy that they were won, and he said, well, no, we weren't, but what they've done gives us hope as another Brazilian team that we can beat the Europeans. And it feels as though if this tournament does have any kind of attraction, it is that tension between the South American sides wanting to prove themselves against the Europeans. I'm not sure there's the appetite on the European side quite so much to sort of stick it to the South Americans in the same way. But maybe that will come in time. And as Rob says, maybe with another kind of 2-3 goes at this, and it creates its own sort of legacy and its own history and its own sort of internal rivalries, that we will see that, and the European teams will attack it with more intent and purpose than maybe they have done at the moment. But you sort of feel as though to do that, there has to be some give in the calendar, which obviously we all know isn't going to happen, because a lot of these players, I mean, Maresca, I've been with Chelsea, Maresca's not even hiding it. They're not training. They're barely training at the moment because of the heat. He's already said the players are tired from the first 2 games. He's going to have to rotate. He was talking yesterday about how this will be the 60th game of their season. It's difficult when the season comes in the middle for the South American clubs to compete with the intensity that they have at the end of a 60-game, 55-game season for the European sides.
The 2 issues that have come up over here, away from the football, have been the crowds, and we know that a lot of the crowds have been really poor. The first Chelsea game was terrible. I think 20,000 at Atlanta. A couple of the City games have been poor. The Botafogo Atletico Madrid game in Pasadena was really bad on Monday night. I think for the proper World Cup, shall I say, or the World Cup next year, I think it'll be different because you've got a bigger fan base from all the different countries. I think that's an issue that won't be such a problem. But the weather's caught a lot of people by surprise. Not just the heat, but so many games have been delayed by thunderstorms. Or there was one game, I think it was a 2-hour delay at one game, and the game in New York was held up for 40 minutes. I mean, Rob, how can they address that next year? We know that America's got a wild climate at times, but what can they do? I mean, do they have to schedule games at different times to make it more appealing to the fans and players? Or how can they get around the situation where the weather is so unpredictable?
Well, I genuinely don't think that they can. I mean, I don't know. Once you've decided to hold a World Cup in America in the summer, you kind of live and die by the weather, and it'll be up to different associations to pick training bases that they decide is the best way to prepare. I mean, City have been based in Boca Raton in Florida, and we went down there a couple of days before they started their first game, and it was absolutely sweltering. I mean, Pep had them out there for 2 hours one day, and the players were walking off, and they looked half dead. They'd been sweating that much. I mean, City have been quite lucky in a sense that they played in Philadelphia first before this heat wave hit, so it was hot, but it wasn't too hot, and then they played their second game in Atlanta at 9:00 in an air-conditioned stadium. So there'll be stuff like that going on. I mean, I imagine associations will be looking at the schedule and thinking and praying that they get the benefit of the conditions, because playing at 12:00 in Miami, say, is completely different playing in Atlanta under a roof at 9:00. And you're talking about, and I imagine lots of people will be listening to this thinking, well, it's just a game of football. What does it matter? Well, it does matter. I mean, that ultimately could be the difference between winning or losing a group game and going home early. And I don't know how FIFA even sort that out, because the conditions are going to be so different. I mean, if you're playing in Seattle, for example, or if you've got 3 group games in Seattle, is that fair when you've got another team that are playing 3 group games in the Hard Rock in Miami? I mean, I don't know. There's going to be a lot of football association bosses, I imagine, petitioning FIFA, or FIFA having to answer questions about how they're deciding where they're going to place these games, because the weather here has been so wild and so different in these different cities that it is causing a competitive advantage for some of these teams.
I was surprised that they didn't use the stadium in Dallas for this tournament, to the AT&T. That's an unbelievable stadium, by the way, but also it's covered. And Rob's right. The World Cup next summer, they'll England's chances, just to sort of turn it to England, England's chances will be considerably improved if they can play in air-conditioned stadiums. It reminds me a bit of Wimbledon, actually, when they shut the roof. When for years and years and years, we petitioned for the centre courts at Wimbledon to have a roof. They put the roof on, and then the players talked about how it was almost a different tournament because the ball moved differently. The air-conditioned arena versus an open-air grass court. It's quicker off the surface. The ball moves slightly differently. The moisture in the air is different. It's, obviously with football, it's not an exact comparison, but the physical ask of, asking players to play in 40-degree heat, pitch side, it could be that in the daytime during the heat wave versus an air-conditioned arena where it's probably half the temperature. I mean, it's a massive. You talk to anyone in sports science or any of the, any of the coaching staff. The Chelsea players yesterday, they were training at Philadelphia Union Subaru Park, which is a sort of small football stadium on the edge of the city, and about I'd say less than a quarter of strip of the stadium was covered in shade by just where the sun was. The sun was in the angle of the stand, and they had a kind of small strip where they were doing all of their training. Basically, they were doing all of their warm-ups, all of their drills in the shed, and by the side of the pit, they had fans with the water being pumped in, so it was pumping out water across the air to them. And they can't do sessions, so the games are going to be affected by this. I mean, obviously, Rob, you've been with City. Did he make 11 changes between the first and the second game? Like that many. I think he's made 4 or 5, and he'll probably do the same in their final game. They're going to have to do that. Now, that is going to benefit the bigger teams in the tournament next summer, and also those sides who get a break, shall we say, for a respite from the heat in the group stage. It will be like a rotation, won't it? If they can play one game in sort of 20 degrees rather than 40 degrees, it gives them a huge advantage in the knockout rounds.
I'll give you an example of how tricky it is. After the City's first game was against Wydad in Philadelphia, and it was at 12 o'clock. And unfortunately for City, the game started under cloud cover and it was manageable. We spoke to Nathan Aki after the game. He said that at the start of the second half, the clouds open, the sun comes out, it starts to be absolutely roasting hot. And he said that he was looking around and the City players were struggling. The game slows and Wydad suddenly become, more into it because they're used to those conditions. And that was sort of a microclimate in the middle of a game. And Nathan Aki, he was talking about the performance and why City had started so well and kind of finished so well, and genuinely thought that because the clouds had opened and the sun started beaming down halfway through the game, that City had really started to struggle in that middle period of the game. And that just tells you how tricky it is that, some of these European teams who aren't used to these kind of conditions that are really going to struggle. And that, City have got their knockout games are either going to be in Orlando, Miami. And that is a massive difference to playing somewhere further north, or we mentioned before in Atlanta under a roof. And it could be the difference between going home early and winning it.
Just that point. So next year, there's 16 venues at the Men's World Cup. Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, and Vancouver are all under roofs with climate control. So that's just 4 out of the 16 stadiums, and they're not all on the same blocks. Obviously, Vancouver will be on the western block, and I think Dallas, Houston, and Atlanta may be the central block. So you've got that to deal with. You've got potentially altitude issues in Mexico. It's probably going to be the most challenging World Cup ever in terms of logistics, because I know that a lot of countries will be based in certain parts of the country. But once the knockout stage kicks in, you kind of could be anywhere. So it's definitely one to watch. So we've kind of gone over quite a lot of negatives so far, the Global Cup, the weather, the football, the crowds. You two have been out there for a couple of weeks now. Both give us a positive each as to what's really cheered you up and made you really kind of think this is good. I know it's going to struggle for you, James, but Rob might have a better opportunity.
The South American teams doing well, I think, is great for the tournament. And genuinely, if on the ground, it feels like the tournament is building to something that's significant. I genuinely think and hope that when you get to the quarterfinals, the semi-finals, and the final with huge teams, hopefully from South America playing the big European teams, I think that there'll be a far greater interest. We'll have some great games of football, and people will buy into it, because it does feel like it's heading somewhere. It doesn't feel like it's kind of just plodding along to a kind of end that people are ambivalent to. It does feel like it's building towards something. Hopefully, we get that.
Yeah, to be fair, I agree with that. I do think there is a sense of we're sort of waiting for the proper stuff to start. Really, we kind of just got to wade through a bloated group stage. I mean, just to pick something slightly different, I'll just pick Lionel Messi having his moment. We know that Inter Miami were kind of shoehorned into this competition on the basis of just trying to get Messi to be part of it. And and they got their social media viral clip, didn't they? They got that free kick against Porto that I've seen about 30,000 times on social media. Just every time I log on, it seems to just be there. And that's what they wanted, and it's nice, for everything that he's done for the game that he can still produce those kind of moments in a competition like this. And we're going to see him one more time in what is a narrative laden round of 16 game against Paris Saint-Germain in Atlanta. So I'll go for that.
Just on that point, for those of us that aren't in the US that were looking from the outside, if you take Messi out of it, are there any players who are actually capturing the attention? Is it all about Messi, even though he's 47 years old or whatever?
Well, I mean,
I know.
Haaland is a big star. You can tell by the way that the reaction when he walks into stadiums, when he comes on as substitute or when his name's on the big screen in stadiums. He is obviously City star, but he's also a big star over here. He's the advertising that I have seen, which isn't a lot, but in Philadelphia, the sort of banners over one of the City Hall buildings, and he's front and center. Very much look like he's meant to be kind of the next one to take over from the Messis and Ronaldos in terms of US audience.
Yeah, and another one on that banner actually is Cole Palmer. I have written a piece about him on the site that he's obviously somebody who's struggling a little bit to live up to that reputation, and we talk about the heat, and he seems to have been somebody who's been affected by that. Perhaps more than some of the others. They deleted the post afterwards, but when Flamenco beat Chelsea, there were a couple of social media digs at him, including one with the temperature, saying, too hot for cold Palmer. And I think, big things are expected of him. He's a very popular lad. We all know that he's a man of few words, but he speaks... whatever he says tends to go viral because he's just so sort of unfiltered and so relatable. But we've not really seen him get going yet in this tournament. A couple of flashes of link-up play with Liam Delap, and obviously it's a big game for Delap against Flamenco that, we're going to see where can he fill the boots of Nicholas Jackson, and can he create that link-up with Palmer, because the sort of thing to recommend Jackson the most is the link up and the understanding that he's got with Palmer and Noni Madueke, and if Delap can replicate or improve on that, then he's probably going to be their starting 9 for next season. But Palmer's one who's really waiting to ignite. I think if he comes alive, then that's what you want. You want these big players, Haalands and the Messis, and you need these players to turn up and really set the imagination alight. And probably not enough of them have done it yet. But there's still plenty of time. To some of them, anyway.